So you are not exempt from what I'm going to talk about today, even if you have been in business for years. I know when we think of terms like niche, you think, oh, we do this at the beginning of business. That is not true. I am seeing more and more and more that people who started their business even 5 years ago are having to reposition, redefine their niche for multiple reasons. And maybe this doesn't mean expanding it or necessarily changing it. It may mean being more clear about who you are for and how you're different. And this is for many reasons. So if you're brand new, you need to do this, period, for obvious reasons. But if you are an experienced business owner, you also need to see if you need to redefine your niche, because once you've been in business for a long time, you built an audience based on things that have changed, particularly if you grew your audience on any form of social media. TikTok, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Algorithms are changing all the time because the job of algorithms is to keep people on the platform longer so that they can charge more for ads, so that they can just monetize the platform more. And then as these platforms have more data, they change the way that things work, which means that those of us who use these platforms for free need to understand how to create and how to nurture an audience based on that. As much as we may not like it, that is just the reality of business. And so what I have seen with people that have been in business for several years is that they grew an audience that was essentially a captive audience because that was their followers. So they put stuff out. People got to build a relationship with them over time, online, on social media, and they got to be unclear. You got to be unclear. You got to be unclear even if you had a business during the pandemic. People's behaviors was literally different. People were at home. They weren't out socializing, going to events, traveling, going to restaurants. It just was a different time. And also you put stuff out and it was like all your bestie followers were engaging with it, seeing it. And so you got to be unclear. Now what we're seeing is that you don't get to do that anymore. Because the majority of people who see your content or don't see it are not always followers. Like if you notice now when you are scrolling, if you're on TikTok, this is pretty much the case. If you just go to the general feed, it's going to be mostly people you don't follow unless you go specifically to your friends tab. But if you're on Instagram, you'll notice that at least 50% of the posts that you see are not people that you follow. They are suggested posts, they are ads. But suggested posts, whether they come up in the feed, in suggested reels, or in the For You page, are all based on interest. And so in order to do that, you need to be really person specific or problem specific. Otherwise, people will continue to scroll past. And this is why folks who experience success in a certain capacity are now having to redefine their niche and the problem they solve and all of that. So we're going to talk about that today because I'm actually doing this with my clients now as a series of workshops in reclamation where we are revisiting high ticket messaging. We are redefining like being very specific about your person type, the problem you solve, and all of that. So we're going to talk about how to define a profitable niche or redefine it if you have been in business for a while. I'm going to give you some questions that we're going to go through. So number one, you're going to know how is a niche profitable? Number two, we're going to define the problem that you solve. And so even if you've done this before, let's do this again together because I want you to see how easily or not you can answer these questions. Because what happens sometimes is you've been doing it for such a long time that if I were to ask you the question off the top of your head, could you answer? Like, what's the problem that you solve and how is it like different from the way anybody else solves it? So we're going to talk about, like I said, number one, how do you know it's profitable? Number two, we're going to define the problem. Number three, we're going to define the person. Number four, we're going to define the positioning. And then we're going to talk about how do you know if it's too niche? Because sometimes what happens is we've been too niche, like we've been talking to a specific audience, but then when I really look at it, I'm like, well, how are there other audiences that you also could help with this? And do we need to zoom out a little bit because you've been speaking to a certain demographic, but really the way that you deliver the solution could be for more than one person type. So that's also how we start to expand, how we start to get even more eyes on our content, and how we don't unnecessarily cut ourselves off from clients and opportunities. So first, how do you know that the niche that you are in is profitable? The way that you will know this is, are people actively spending money already to solve this problem? I describe this as being on someone's shopping list or fighting to be on it. Like, are you already on somebody's shopping list or are you fighting to be on it? So if they are actively spending money trying to solve this problem and failing, or they have actively spent money trying to solve this problem and it took them to a certain extent and now they are like, what's next? And if you know that your clients have already invested in this multiple times in other ways, then that means that the unmet need is strong. And it also means that the urgency is strong. So you're not convincing someone who's just like, yeah, I know, but like, it's kind of fine. Or like, I might think about it next year and things like that. So if they're already spending on it in other ways to try to solve it, then like I said, the urgency is there, the unmet need is there. When you are speaking, if you know that this is you and you're like, yes, by the time that I work with clients, they have done this, they've done that, they have this information, that information, they've tried this, they've made this investment, they've hired this person, they've taken this medication, like whatever that is. If you are in this niche and you know that it's profitable because you're already on their shopping list, like they've already been investing, it is going to be very important that you address that you know how they've tried to solve it before, why it didn't work or why it ran its course, either way, and how this is different. Otherwise, they will see you as, oh, I already tried that. Or, oh, well, if that didn't work, then this won't either. So like examples of this could be somatic and nervous system coaches tend to not be people's very first investment with anything that has to do with like body or mind. Their clients tend to have gone to therapy before. They have some form of like self-awareness or even like body literacy or like awareness of like inner child, like just different terms. And by the time they get to hire a somatic or nervous system coach, they know that the previous solution has run its course. It's not that it didn't work, it's just that it ran its course. So that's an example of like when you talk to your clients and you know that you're not their first attempt on this journey, it's important to talk about what they've probably done before and why that made sense or why it didn't work either way. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, I feel like I've already tried that. So that's how you know that it's profitable. You're already on someone's shopping list or already on their active payroll and you're not fighting to be on it. Another example of this is there was a time that so many people that I knew, including myself, my friends, my peers, my coaches even, were hiring people to repurpose their content. Meaning they were that person's job was just to come into your business and be like, or their VA was doing it. They're like pulling stuff from calls, and they were just repurposing the content. Almost everyone I know who did that eventually came back and was like, yeah, this is not helping. Like, this is not helping my sales. I have content going out, but it's missing me. It's missing my voice. And people were spending a lot of money on doing that. And so inevitably, we all had a similar realization of like, okay, we're all spending money trying to solve the problem of content. What is it that we actually need? And so people have been solving that in different ways by number one, being like, do I need to actually outsource this or do I need to get back into my content and actually strengthen my messaging? So it's like, maybe you need to strengthen your messaging or you need to create a system, like a content system that your team can help you with, but not actual copywriting, like taking the copywriting back. But that's an example of something that like for a time, like years ago, I saw everybody was like investing in this and now people are taking their content back and they're outsourcing it in different ways. So that's how you know it's profitable. Like I said, people are spending money already trying to solve this problem. So number two, let's define the problem. So I feel like whenever it comes to a niche, the most basic niche that I would not go with this, but I see people do this all the time, is they'll just go based on what they want to do. It's something they like, something that they're good at. You could do that, and maybe that can work for a time, and it can work if you really like, that's where you're overly relying on like your belief and your conviction and your excitement. And then you sell to people who buy emotionally, or you sell to people who have been following you for a long time. But really, I call this where you just pick something out of thin air that you like. So the reason that this is the most basic way to niche yourself is because you haven't validated this against anything. And people don't pay you as a business owner to do what you like to do. They pay you to solve problems. So if you stop at what you like and what you're passionate about, it's kind of the most selfish, self-centered way of niching and having a business, because what you're kind of doing is you're saying, here's the party I wanted to throw. Let me sell you on why you should come to this party, versus, hey, I heard you were looking for this. I built it for you. Like, come to this party. And so, but I see people do that all the time where I'm just like, how do we know that this is like going to make money? And the thing is you probably will make money up front. But where I see this happening is people will change, like you'll look back at their feed and they've just changed their titles hella times, or they sell to their bestie clients and then it stops coming, or they only sell to people who have like heard about them from someone else and like nobody's buying because they don't really get what you do, or they're like, nobody asked you for that. So we can't just create shit just because we feel like it. Like nobody asked you for that. And I think that that is kind of respectfully, an immature way of creating a business, because you're just making shit up. And like I said, it does work to an extent, but can you build a long-term business without actually listening to people, thinking about what they're saying, what they're doing, what they're trying to solve, and solving their problems? That's what mature business owners do. That's what sustainable business owners do, is we are obsessed with solving people's problems. We're obsessed with like, why are they doing this? Why are they thinking this? Why did they try this? And if you're thinking about yourself and what you want to sell, like, that's not business. That's like a hobby you want to get paid for. And like, it's just not going to last at a certain point. Like, I don't see people in multi-year businesses that are stacking revenue and growing their client base and adding to their monthly recurring revenue by just doing shit that they want to do. They're constantly listening. So level 1 is something you like and are good at. Basic. Level 2 is you're actually solving a problem. Then level 3 is people are already spending money trying to solve that problem, and it happens to be something you like solving and you're good at. Okay. So level 1, basic, is it's something you like and you're good at. Level 2 is it actually solves a problem that people know that they have, that they know that they have. And number 3 is they're already spending money trying to solve it and you happen to like it and be good at it. Okay. So that's what I would say. And this doesn't necessarily even mean that if you're doing something and you just picked it because you were passionate about it, that you have to scrap it, but it does mean that it will run its course at a certain point, and you're going to have to start talking about how is the absence of this information, of this process, of this support, of this whatever it is, showing up in people's lives, and how could their life be better, richer, more fulfilled with this thing, but like really being focused on like what's the problem that it solves. Sometimes it could be a desire, but people are more motivated to solve a problem than they are to meet a desire. And you will see this when it comes down to like, if people have to pick between one investment or another, they start to feel scarce, they will cut desires and they will go to solve problems. Okay. The other part about this around defining the problem is that the problem needs to be in their words, not yours. And this is key. And this is actually a lot harder than you think, because we get very experty with like our language. And it's like, if you can't imagine them saying it out of their mouth, what are they saying? What are they thinking? Could you pluck that train of thought out of their brain? Or is this your expert diagnosis? They're not thinking about your expert diagnosis. They're thinking about what is happening in their mind, what's happening when they wake up, what are they not doing, how are they feeling, like those words. That's the problem. Now we're going to define the person. So who is most likely to experience this problem? Or who is the person most likely to have this desire? Let's entertain both, because both are valid. It's just one has more urgency. So who is the person most likely to experience this problem or have this desire? So you could do this in one of 2 ways. Sometimes people will define this by like demographics. So it might be like the title that they have, their ethnicity or racial background, age, whether they're a mom, whether they are in the workforce, whether like all those things, like a title. Another way could be by an identity. So it's like high achieving perfectionists, or a person who's had a certain experience versus like an external title. And the question that I've always asked my clients is like, what is the common thread in the person that experiences this problem? Like, what's the common thread that they kind of all have? Because sometimes what we can do is we can narrow it down too much, where someone will say, for example, I'm an ADHD coach for moms, but you just do general ADHD coaching. But do other people also experience this, or are your methods specific to moms? And if they're not, then like either the methods need to be specific to moms, or we need to broaden like who your audience is, right? So this is how you avoid over niching or being too general. So define the person that experiences, that's most likely to experience that problem, and what is the common thread that they all have in common. Okay, so finally, we're going to define the positioning now, which means the positioning is how you are different. I always think about walking through the drugstore and there's hella different shampoos And if you aren't like loyal to a particular shampoo, they all have to position themselves on the label. So some of them will be like for dry, damaged, color treated hair, for fine hair, for curly hair, deep conditioning mask for blah, blah, blah. Like that's all positioning. And it's like the words that are on the outside. It's like, this is how I'm different. And so you just shop based on essentially desires or symptoms or whatever. Like you're like, oh, well, what am I looking for? So your positioning is kind of like the label on the outside of the bottle if it's standing next to a bunch of other bottles. So you have to think about, it's like, how am I different? And there's a couple ways you can be different, right? So, but really the main thing is your positioning lies often in your method. So your method, the way that your clients experience you, all of that. So your method needs to be different, because if it's the same, then they could just go get that somewhere else. It's kind of like the method would be like the shampoo in the bottle, right? And even if it is, the positioning still needs to be different, because literally in some cases it could be the same shampoo and the other one just has a different smell, or it could be literally the exact same thing, but what's on the outside of the bottle, like that's what people are going to buy, right? And so you honestly want to be different, but it's the way that you talk about it, right? So it's like, what is your method and how is it different? And your method could be the way that you serve your clients. It could be a particular approach or framework. It could be a certain lens that you bring into your work. It could be a process. It could be lots of things, but your method needs to be different. And essentially, your method needs to solve this problem differently and better for that specific person type. Okay? So it needs to solve that problem differently and better for that specific person type. Now, if your person type is very broad, you can also do this. But if your person type is very broad, meaning you are selling something that all entrepreneurs need, you have a little bit of a tougher job, only because that means that your method really needs to be different and revolutionary, and it really needs to speak to a like pervasive, ongoing unmet need that audience is experiencing. Otherwise, they're like, yeah, like I've heard that before, right? And just think about how like that's what people default to, is saying like, yeah, I heard that before, I tried that before, I bought that before, like I already have that, or I already tried that. So the more broad your person type is, the more like revolutionary, different your method needs to be in a meaningful way to solve something different. Here's where I'm going to tell you this, because like I coached a client on this week about niches, and that it needs to be meaningfully specific. And so here's what I mean. Like, I do not recommend niching based on who comes to you, just who comes to you. I think that's a great place to start. I think that's a great place to get like market research, but over time that's reactive, because the people who come to you are not the market, right? So this is how people will get too niche, because they're basically like responding to like, oh, well, what does my audience want from me? And like, what are people coming to me for? And I'm like, yeah, but is that who you want to work with? Because then you end up with like a mishmash of different clients, or you end up kind of over indexing on what people are telling you, rather than you being like, what am I seeing is missing, and how am I creating what is missing for everybody that experiences that, and then speaking to them and then calling those people in, versus only responding to the people that are in front of you. So I remember one of my former mentors who's made like $40 million in coaching. She's like, you never create an offer based on your past clients. Like, you never want to take your past clients with you. And I think to an extent, I can see why we look back at clients based on, because I do this with my clients. Like, we do look back at your past clients to validate an offer, to say, well, what are they saying? What's the client language? Like, what is all of that? But we don't want to limit ourselves to that. That's really what it is. You don't ever want to limit yourself only based on past people that you've worked with. You really want to look at, what is the gap? Like, what's the unmet need? What is it that people are spending on already that they really, really need, that you are solving differently and better? Because that's the market. It's not just the people that you've worked with in the past. And when you think about growth exists in that. It doesn't just exist in the past, because that's you being a leader, that's you being a visionary, that's you creating what you see is missing in the world. Okay. In business terms, when I was a marketer, we called this total addressable market, TAM. Total addressable market is like, if you are selling to, let's say, Latina therapists, how many Latina therapists are there? If you are selling to kindergarten Spanish immersion teachers in California, how many are there, right? Like, we really want to look at that. And how you know it's too niche is that if your solution, without any changes, could actually work for people beyond your current niche, then it's too niche. And if your marketing without major changes would still speak to that audience, then it's probably too niche. Okay. So I'll even tell you like my business. So I've always spoken to first gen, and sometimes people will say like, oh, I serve this particular audience. But when you actually get into their programs or when you work with this person, anybody could actually get into that program and still get the same results as anybody else, right? So that's kind of where I'm like, that's like external branding, but that's not reflected in the process. The process could work for anybody. So it's kind of like if you say you serve women of color, white women and white men and anybody else can come in and get the same results. Like you do serve them and that's who you care about serving, but the process doesn't reflect that it's different for that particular audience. In my business, my processes are very specific to the lived experiences of first gen and women of color. So when I think about like my methods around mindset, how scarcity is activated, people who have like voice and visibility wounds, like basically anybody who didn't grow up knowing who they are, practicing using their voice, practicing being seen, like a lot of my methods take that into consideration. So like my methods and my processes are actually very identity specific. So when I say that I serve a specific audience, I really mean it in my processes. Now, I've had to consider this in terms of like, am I being too niche in this? But if I expanded it, would that actually come at the detriment of the people in the program? And in some cases, the answer is yes, it would. And this is why I'm not too niche. I'm very accurately niche because my methods really specifically serve that audience. I could then decide that I want to expand the niche because there aren't enough people of that demographic to serve, and I want to expand the niche. But then that means that I also need to adjust the methods. But if your method and your solution could work for people that are not from your target audience, then it probably is too niche. And like I said, if you didn't have to drastically change your marketing, it's probably also too niche. And that's just so you don't, like I said, artificially cap yourself. So I was coaching a client this week and they're already landing clients. And that's the thing, is like, this doesn't mean you're not landing clients. They're actually having their biggest year. But we're noticing disparity in terms of like who's coming to them. And then they were speaking to wellness entrepreneurs. But then when we started getting to talking about the clients and what they actually had in common, what they all had in common is that they are ridiculous high achievers. Like they are just people who like want to do the best job at everything. They over deliver. They're to their own detriment. They would identify with being overgivers and perfectionists, right? And so I was like, do they have to be wellness entrepreneurs in order to be this person? And it's like, no, they don't. And so, but wellness entrepreneurs are more likely to be overgivers because a lot of the times people get into industries where they're like serving other people because they feel like, if I'm serving other people, I can't get paid a lot. I need to like overextend myself. I can't charge too much. Like, so it could be that, let's say, wellness entrepreneurs are more likely to be overgivers and high achievers or perfectionists, but it's not mutually exclusive. So sometimes I'm just like, okay, do we want to just speak to wellness entrepreneurs? Because if we do, then we need to get more specific about what specifically about wellness entrepreneurs, like what are their challenges that are very unique to being wellness entrepreneurs that nobody else experiences, because otherwise you're not being specific enough. So you either need to get more specific about what does that demographic or that title experience that nobody else does? Like, let's get deeper. Or if your method could work for people that don't have that title, then let's zoom out a little bit. And maybe instead of a demographic, like wellness entrepreneurs title, it's more of an identity, which is high achieving perfectionists who are overgivers and like why they stay overworked and underpaid in business. So that's where we're getting somewhere. I'm like, what's the common thread in your method? Like when you think about the problem that you're solving, who is most likely to experience that problem? Is it a person with a certain title or is it a person with a certain identity or behavior? And then we can be more meaningfully specific to that person without artificially cutting ourselves off. So I'm going to recap what I shared. So firstly, how to define a profitable niche or refine it, even if you've been in business for several years. So number one, validate that it's profitable by asking yourself, am I already on this person's shopping list or am I fighting to be on it? Meaning, are they actively spending money, taking action to solve this problem, or am I convincing them that they need to? Number two, define the problem. Level one of a profitable problem is you just like it and you're good at it. That doesn't even necessarily mean there's a problem. Level two is you're actually solving a problem. And number three is people are already spending money trying to solve it. And it happens to be something you like to solve and are good at. Okay. And defining it in their words. So number three, what we talked about is defining the person who is most likely to experience this problem and what is the common thread in all of them. And this is how you avoid over niching or being too general. Number four, define your positioning. Your positioning is how you deliver the solution differently and better. Generally, this is in your method. There's something in your method, unless you sell a product, in which case it's the ingredients, it's the product. So the method could be the frameworks, it could be your client experience, it could be your lens, it could be the culture of the space that you cultivate. It could be a number of those things. It could be a specific framework, IP, it could be tools that you created, it could be custom GPTs that you have in your program. So your method is how you deliver it differently for that specific person type. So your method needs to solve this problem differently and better for that specific person type. And if your person type is very broad, then your method really needs to be different in a way that solves a problem that they have been trying to solve for a long time. Okay. And then number 5, how you know it's too niche is that if your solution without any changes could actually work for people beyond your current niche, it's too niche. Or if your marketing without any major changes would also still speak to them, then it's probably too niche. I would say ideally, if the answer to both of those questions is yes, not one or the other. If the answer to both of those questions is yes, it probably is too niche. This is all what feels like basic business steps. One thing that I have noticed is if you are in business long enough, you are always going to have to revisit things over and over because your business is going to change, like who's actually in your lead pool, who is seeing your content, the economy, socioeconomic things going on, like so many things are going to impact your business. So I think that part of how people stay in business is by never letting their ego make them think that they have graduated beyond a certain point. And that is what keeps you curious. It is what keeps you client and customer centric. It is what keeps you paying attention versus feeling like, oh, well, like I've done this before. I shouldn't have to do this. Like, yo, I know so many of us, like OG coaches in particular, and just business owners who have had to go back to basics and do things that we didn't have to do before because we experienced fast success in like a certain way, or we experienced success in a landscape that no longer exists or that has significantly changed. And that is just part of business. Like if you've been around long enough, I think about like myself being a marketer. I've been a full-time marketer since the year 2004. So I was a marketer before there were smartphones. Smartphones did not exist. We had Motorola flip phones. iPhone did not come out until like 2007, 2008. And social media. Also, there was no Facebook. I don't even think there was Facebook then because I remember it kind of being more prevalent later. And so that would be equivalent to being like, I'm a marketer. Like, I've already done this before. I don't need to. And I'm like, no, literally my entire job had to change with the advent, with the prevalence of social media and smartphones, right? So like, we couldn't just be like, I don't need to do that. Same thing with AI. AI has changed our jobs because now information is so readily available that we cannot be marketing information. We need to be marketing transformation. We need to be marketing identity. We need to be marketing solutions to complex problems that take all things into consideration. Like, we need to be marketing how we are able to hold space for nuance, which is essentially emotional intelligence, right? We need to be marketing those like a higher level. And when we don't do that, it's just ego. There's a term called old head. Elder millennials probably more know this. It's like if you're an old head, like you're kind of complaining about like kids nowadays and like how things are changing, and then they refuse to adapt. And I'm just like, don't be an old head. If you were going to be in business, I have been a marketer since 2004. I have been a coach since end of 2019. Anybody that is successful is always going to have to adapt and be agile and stay current and stay curious. I personally have changed my mind on many things that I didn't think that I needed to do, things that I thought I already needed to do from 6 months ago to now. And I'm going to do a separate podcast episode on all the things I've changed my mind about, all the things that I'm changing in my business because I am seeing how the landscape is changing, not just with social media, but just like the world. Like I'm just thinking about, especially because I serve a lot of like Latinas and first gen, and we're looking at like what's happening now with like ICE and our administration and how that's affecting, how like people's pockets or like how they're investing or how they're thinking about like taking risks right now. So there's so many, or how they're feeling like in freeze mode and like shut down. Like we have to be paying attention at all times, right? So this is our jobs. This is our jobs. And this is what I help my clients do and think about. And this is part of how we create sustainable businesses. This is how you become the CEO who can thrive regardless of the circumstances or who can bounce back quickly. Because ultimately, this is the job that we've chosen, right? Like we've chosen a turbulent like landscape that's unpredictable, but we also are really smart and agile and we can solve problems. And this is something that you're never going to graduate beyond, right? Like you're always going to be a problem solver. You're always going to have to like observe what's going on around you. You're always going to have to be looking at what happened. Why did it happen? Why did the sales call close? Why did it not? How did this opportunity come about? Like all of those things are really important. This is how my clients are able to stack their wins and not start from scratch, because every time they're getting smarter and sharper and wiser and better at making decisions and better at solving problems and better at managing their emotions and just like stronger and stronger in their confidence and their leadership. And if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to reach out about working together, because in certain seasons, structured programs have served their purpose. And now you are in a place where you want a coach to be able to look across the history of your business at your life and your offers and be able to spot specific gaps. And that's what I do with my clients. I don't work with you and then say, here's my 3-step framework. We're auditing. We're looking back at all the things that you have done, all the things that you've posted. I'm looking at your website. I'm looking at your marketing materials. I'm looking at the places that you're posting. I'm looking at the clients you've landed and where they've come from. And we're taking all of that into account. This is how you're able to get such detailed feedback and guidance, because I'm quite literally helping you to fill gaps and take into consideration all the things that you've already done. And we all need this from time to time. It's almost like taking your business to the acupuncturist or like for a tune-up. And I love doing that. This is what I did as a marketer. I also have a $700 month-to-month Telegram coaching help. If you're just like, Mariela, I just want to pick your brain. I have some thoughts. I have some decisions that I need to make right now. In Telegram coaching, I'm working with an agency owner who is hiring, and she's trying to figure out like what roles she needs to hire for first. I'm also working with another client now who's launching a workshop, and we're making sure that the angle of the workshop is going to sell her offer. So there's so many different things we can work on in Telegram coaching. And for that, you will have to send me a DM on Instagram, and then I can send you more information. All right, y'all. Thank you for being with me. I'll see y'all on the next episode.